Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is a special bonus series entitled, Why is the Whole World Against Us? The purpose of this series is to offer a deeper spiritual insight into the current war that Israel is waging against Hamas in Gaza, as well as the geopolitical war Jews all around the world are waging in defense of our right to the land of Israel as our homeland and against worldwide anti-Semitism, which has risen exponentially in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre. The teachings I'll be relating are based on a Sicha given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the year Tafshin Chavvav, or in the Hebrew year of 5726, or the English year of 1965. And the Sicha is on Parshas Breishis, based on the first Rashi in Parshas Breishis. I studied and recorded this material in the merit of a swift victory of the IDF and the protection of all of our fellow soldiers and all Jewish lives within the land of Israel and throughout the world, as well as for the speedy return of our hostages. May it happen very, very soon. So if you've made it this far, congratulations. I believe that today we'll see how it goes, but I think that today is going to be the final episode in this special series that I've been recording on the topic of this very pivotal Sicha given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the very first Rashi of the Torah in Parshas Breishis. To give a quick recap of what we've covered so far in this series, first of all, we looked at that very first Rashi, in which Rashi asked the question as to why is it that the Torah begins with the story of the creation of the world, when if the Torah is coming from the word hora'ah, which means a lesson or to teach, if the point of the Torah really essentially is to serve as a book of lessons for the Jewish people, what is the inherent lesson for the Jewish people in the Torah beginning with the story of the creation of the world? When seemingly it would seem as if the Torah should have began with the very first official lesson, official mitzvah that was given to the Jewish people, which was the blessing of the new month, which features much later on in the Torah, actually found in the book of Shmot, in the second book of the Torah. And then in answer to his own question, Rashi says that the reason that the Torah began this way is in order to provide the Jews with an answer to the nations of the world if they come to us and accuse us of robbery for stealing the land of Israel. And then the Rebbe takes this whole Rashi, the question and the answer and everything, and he really dissects it into four different parts and asks questions on all four aspects of this Rashi, namely Rashi's question, namely the accusation of the nations. What does this mean that they're calling us robbers? What's the actual accusation behind that? Our answer to the nations of the world, as well as Rashi's entire answer and its collectivity, meaning why does Rashi feel that this is a good answer to his own question, this whole discussion regarding the ownership of the land of Israel and all of that. And in this lecture series, we've been really exploring all of this, and we went through each section. We went through Rashi's question, the accusation of the nations, our answer to the accusation of the nations, and Rashi's answer. And in each one of these sections, we discussed the Rebbe's questions on each of these, and then we provided answers for each of these. And through this entire discussion, we really came to a much deeper understanding and appreciation as to who the Jewish people are, as to what the land of Israel is, and what our essential connection is to the land of Israel. As we've seen, there were many details to all of this, and for time purposes, I don't think it makes sense to get into all of it again here. So I encourage you to go back and listen to the full series if you'd like to really delve into all of it in extreme detail. But the kind of conclusion of it all was this idea that the Jewish people's ownership and connection to the land of Israel is not just a superficial one, but it's actually a very essential one, in the sense that when we conquered the land of Israel, this wasn't just a conquering that was done by any other nation, but in fact, this was a conquering in such a way that that our conquering the land of Israel changed the essence of the land of Israel in such a way that it could never again be owned by any other nation in the world. We changed the essential nature of the land. And this changing of this transformation of the essential nature of the land in this very existential kind of way is something that the non-Jewish nations, whether they're conscious of it or not, is something that they pick up on, which is where this accusation of robbery comes from, and which is why they accuse us of robbery, is because they sense that when we conquer the land, we're not conquering it the way that any other nation conquers any other land. We're conquering it in a unique and special kind of way, a way that kind of goes against the normal rules of war and conquest. And our answer to why we didn't actually steal the land and why this is actually okay comes from this idea of how God actually gave us this land at the very moment of creation, and that in creating the entire world, which God is behind the creation of the entire world, he actually set aside in his mind that the land of Israel was going to be for us. So this was the intent all along. And we came to really explore and understand how keeping this initial intention in mind and understanding the principle of how the end is wedged in the beginning is wedged in the end, we can really come to understand how really this initial purpose that God had in mind, that we should ultimately have the land of Israel, and that it should be conquered and owned by the Jews, and it should be transformed ultimately into a Jewish land through and through, then really everything that leads up to that is really part and parcel of that process and that plan. It's all part of it. So even the fact that for many years we didn't actually have ownership over the land, and even now in our present times, we do not have full ownership. This battle continues today, as we see very much now in this war that's going on in Israel and in this global geopolitical war over the right of the land of Israel to exist, and all of this, this fight is going on very much now. This whole fight, this whole process, this whole battle that we have to go to really gain this ownership fully over the land of Israel is actually all part of the process. It's all leading up to this ultimate goal, this ultimate purpose, which is that we should have the land of Israel for ourselves. And after coming to this understanding of, the surface level, and it's not so surface, there's a lot of details as we've seen, but really coming to understand fully what was meant by Rashi in his question and his answer and accusation of the nations and our answer to the nations and all of that, we came to also come to this deeper understanding as to a deeper aspect of what's going on. Because just as there's a principle of that the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning is wedged in the end, there's also a concept of a microcosm and a macrocosm, meaning to say that there's a famous teaching that the man is a small world and the world is a big man, meaning to say that everything that happens globally is also happening internally for every single person, every single Jew specifically, and that when we look at the happenings in history and the happenings in the land of Israel, we can all relate to it in terms of our own personal struggle, our own personal journey through this world. And we spoke about this in terms of our journey as a person, as a Jew, coming into this world, beginning with our conception in our mother's womb and our journey in our mother's womb as a fetus, in which time we're taught, it's taught in the Gemara that we're taught the entire Torah in our mother's womb by an angel. And then when we're born into this world, an angel comes and taps us on our upper lip and causes us to forget the entire Torah that we were taught. And then throughout our lives, it's a process of remembrance. It's a process of relearning everything that we forgot. So ultimately, we can come to a deeper appreciation and integration of the Torah through our Torah learning. And that Torah learning is really ultimately our purpose in this world, in a certain sense. We can say that that's our purpose, is to relearn everything that we forgot, but that we were ultimately taught in our mother's womb. And we discussed how all of this journey of our Torah study really parallels the process of the Jews as a whole collectively gaining ownership or regaining ownership really over the land of Israel. So just like originally God set aside it in his mind that the land of Israel would be ours, so in a certain sense it was always ours, just more in potential than in actuality, so too that would correspond with the stage of us being inside of our mother's womb as a fetus and learning and knowing the entire Torah in a very essential way. But yet it was in a way of pregnancy, like it wasn't actually manifest to the world. Like when a woman is pregnant, the baby is hidden inside of her. You don't actually see the baby. So yes, we knew the entire Torah, but it was in a more like esoteric kind of way. It wasn't actually manifest in the world. And then at the moment of birth, when we forgot the entire Torah, now we're sort of like, manifestly like a clean slate kind of thing, where we're just a human being with a human mind who doesn't know anything. You ask a baby about anything in the Torah, they're going to give you a blank stare, or like they won't be able to actually communicate with you anything about the Torah, even though, as we've learned, they literally right before they were born knew the entire Torah. So this corresponds to the stage in Galus, in exile, through which the land of Israel belonged for so many years to the non-Jewish nation and was not in the hands of the Jewish people at all, at least not in a manifest, real, tangible way. And then the stories of the Torah, there's all these stories that are told in the Torah that come before we actually received the Torah on Mount Sinai. And we learn about, our forefathers, and we actually learn about a bunch of non-Jewish nations as well, and all these stories. And the question came up, why do we have to learn about all this? Why didn't the Torah just begin with the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai? And we said that the reason for this is because this was all part of the process. And so this process leading up to the receiving of the Torah, the ultimate gaining of the Torah and the ultimate conquest of the land of Israel, this parallels to our own lives and to our own process, to our own personal journeys, whereby we're throughout our lives, we're learning and we're using our minds, and we learn from our mistakes. And it's a struggle. It's a real struggle, as we come to try to understand the Torah, try to relearn the Torah with our human limited intellect. And then ultimately, when we actually do come to learn the Torah and we do come to this re-understanding of it and relearning of it, it actually, even though, yes, we're using our human minds to be able to do this, there's something divine about it. There's something infinite about it, and which goes against the regular type of laws of nature. Like right now, as I'm recording this episode, it's actually in the middle of Hanukkah. And one of the things that we learn about in the story of Hanukkah is that what the Greeks were against wasn't so much the learning of Torah, like that it wasn't so much that they didn't want the Jews to learn Torah at all. They recognized the fact that the Torah was a book of wisdom, and the Greeks were very fond of philosophy and wisdom and intellectual endeavors. So they recognized the Torah as a book of intellect, of great wisdom. But what they were against was the divinity of the Torah. So they were okay with the Jews studying the Torah as a book of philosophy coming from the human mind. But what they were not okay with was taking it to that next level and saying that, in fact, no, when we study Torah, it's not just an intellectual endeavor, like the same as lahavdil if we're learning Plato or Aristotle or Nietzsche or any philosopher that you can think of, but in fact we're relearning something that we always had within us, that the wisdom is actually contained within us in a very infinite and divine way. And so once again, this parallels the conquering of the land of Israel, that when we conquered that land of Israel as Jews, it's not just that we're a regular nation conquering a land just like any other nation would conquer a land in a time of war. But in fact, our conquering of the land, there's something infinite, there's something divine about it. And that divinity and the fact that God set aside this land for us at the very moment of creation in his mind is what allows us to conquer this land and to actually transform its essence, so that now it becomes apparent to everybody, even to the non-Jewish nations, that this is a divine land. This can never again be transformed into anything else. This is a Jewish land through and through. So that's the parallel that we learned between the study of Torah and our every individual's journey through studying Torah throughout our lives, and the collective journey of the Jewish people in regaining our control and conquest over the land of Israel. And it's meant to be a struggle, as we've learned. This is what makes it into, there's a difference between when we're given a gift in a way that's undeserving. That's called the bread of shame in Kabbalah, versus when you really work for it. And that's, God wants us to work for it because he recognizes the fact that when you work for something, it becomes all the more real, it becomes all the more precious and all the more ingrained in your very being. So this is true whether in a collective sense, again, in terms of the conquering of the land of Israel, and it's also true on an individual level when we really struggle and toil and work for learning Torah. This is how Torah was meant to be learned. Now today, in our final section of the Sicha, we're actually going to look at the Torah itself, independent of the fact of somebody learning the Torah, but actually the Torah in its own right, as its own entity. And we'll see that the Torah itself serves as its own microcosm in this grand process. Or in fact, you can say perhaps the Torah is the macrocosm and everything else is the microcosm, because really everything comes from the Torah. We learn that God looked into the Torah and created the world. So the Torah really is this kind of primordial thing, this primordial entity within which everything can be found. So today we're going to look within the Torah itself and how the Torah itself descended into this world and continues to descend into this world, and how the Torah itself follows this same evolutionary process that we've been discussing. So essentially, what is the Torah? Interesting question. What is the Torah exactly? So we're taught that the Torah, if we wanted to kind of give a definition of what the Torah is that it's the wisdom and will of God. So even when we go back to that idea that God looked into the Torah and created the world, we know that God created the world through his will and wisdom, which now we know really is synonymous with the Torah. The Torah and God's will and wisdom are one and the same. Nevertheless, we know that, when we talk about God, when we talk about any aspect of God, it's impossible to really grasp him fully. Another thing that we're taught about God is that God is beyond comprehension, beyond human reason. Nevertheless, there's this interesting paradox, because as much as God is unknowable, ultimately, we actually have a mitzvah, the very first mitzvah that the Rambam gives us, the very first directive that the Rambam gives us in his Mishnah Torah, is that the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom is to know that there is one primary being, meaning that there is one God. So the way that this is understood, this teaching, is that as much as on the one hand, it's kind of paradoxical, because on the one hand we say that God is unknowable, it's impossible for any creature to ever fully grasp and comprehend him. Nevertheless, we have this obligation to know God. We have this obligation to use our faculties to really come to this knowledge of God. And when we say come to this knowledge of God, we don't mean that it's a fruitless endeavor. It means that there is in some way a way for us to actually know God, essentially. And how does this happen? This is through the Torah. The Torah is this tool that God gave to us, that God brought down and descended into this world, that allows us to access him in an essential and direct way. But how does this happen? This itself is kind of beyond reason. How is this made possible? So in this section of the Sicha, the Rebbe actually describes this chain of descent, this process, by way this happens, that the Torah goes from being this essential part of God that's synonymous with God's will and wisdom, that is beyond comprehension, that is untouchable, so to speak, and how it comes down here in this form that's extremely accessible to us and yet remains totally unchanged in the process. The Torah is likened to water that descends from a high place to a low place, so that even, let's say when you're drinking water, out of your kitchen faucet, if you think about it, you can trace that water back all the way back to its source in some ocean or somewhere, even if the water went through, let's say, a filtration process, the essential waterness of it, the essential water itself, is the exact same water. And so too is the Torah. The Torah, yes, it goes through, we can say, kind of quote unquote, some kind of filtration process, which is what we can talk about, is what we're going to discuss today. But it really is the same water. It's the same unchanged water, the same unchanged Torah, the same unchanged will and wisdom of God. And so the way that this works, the Rebbe explains, is that this descent process is called what's known as the Seder Hishtalshelus, which we can kind of translate to mean like a spiritual chain of descent. So the study of the Seder Hishalshalos is a huge one in Chassidus. Chassidus is sort of founded upon this Seder Hishalshalos. It's like the map of descent, we could say. And within this Seder Hishalshalos, there are worlds, there are angels, there are hechalos, chambers, souls. There's a lot of stuff going on. So it would be impossible to go through all of that today, or really any day. Like it's that chain of descent, that Seder Hishalshalos is really, really vast, but in brief, this is what the Sicha gets into. We can say that within the Seder Hishalshalos, there are 4 basic realms. The first realm is what's known as Atzilus. Atzilus means emanation, and this is the realm which is actually not even always called a realm or a world, because to call something a realm or a world means that it's kind of separate. It has its own independent existence, versus the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, doesn't actually have its own independent existence. It's still, for the most part, really one with God in a manifest way. It does not feel itself to have its own independent existence. All it is that there's a potential for something independent to exist. So if we think about the conception and birth of a child, which often these worlds are likened to, we can say that the world of Atzilus really corresponds to the potential for a child to be born within the mother. So it's like maybe, the eggs inside of the mother, like before they're an actual entity. So it's like the eggs of the mother and the sperm of the father before they actually unite, before there's a conception at all. Then you have the 3 lower realms, in which are actual realms, actual worlds. That's what's known as the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And again, if we wanted to think about this in terms of the conception and birth of a child, the way that we can kind of visualize this is that the world of Bria, which is translated to mean the world of creation, is when there's an actual creation, the actual conception of the child. So now that's the moment of conception. The man and woman got together, the sperm and the egg got together, and the egg gets fertilized, and perhaps we can say maybe that's where there's a zygote, like there's a very, very, there's the beginning of something going on, but it's not much. It doesn't really have much of a form. Then we come to the next world, which is known as the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. And this would correspond to the actual, formation of the child within the mother's womb. It's a fetus, and it goes through a formation, it's growing, there's different forms of it. And spiritually speaking, in these realms, there are different, each one of these realms has its own corresponding whole world going on in terms of, as I mentioned, angels, souls, chambers, all kinds of different things. And then finally, we have the world of Asiya, the world of action. And this would correspond in the conception and birth of the child to the actual birth, to the actual physical. Now you have a baby that's born. It's separate from the mother, even though its whole entire existence came from the mother and from the father. Now it's its own separate entity. And we know that similarly in the spiritual realms, the world of Asiya is the lowest of all the realms. And it's the one that kind of has its own separate existence of its own, or at least so to speak, we want to say, because everything really ultimately is sourced in God. Remember, everything comes from that initial water. Everything comes from that initial Torah. But the world of Asiya feels itself to have its own entity, its own separate entity, its own separate existence. And so just as within there's this chain of events that happens in the conception and birth of a child, and there's also this chain of events that happens in terms of the creation of the entire world, so too does this correspond to how the Torah itself descends into the world. So as we mentioned, the Torah itself in its kind of primary form, like in the highest realm, which would be like the realm of Atzilus, is the will and wisdom of God. This is like essentially this untouchable will and wisdom of God, where the Torah is one and the same with God. There's no separation between the two of these things. And then, as we know, the Torah does descend into a way that is more comprehensible to us. There's yeshivas and shiurim, and right now what we're all studying Torah. So how is this possible if it is this lofty will and wisdom of God? So it goes through these various realms. And each one of these various realms of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya correspond to different aspects of Torah study, different ways by which we study the Torah. So There's an acronym that's often used to describe the various aspects of Torah, which is known as Pardes. Pardes means a field, and it's made up of 4 letters: Pei, Resh, Daled, and Samech. And each one of those 4 letters corresponds to a different aspect of the Torah and a different way that we study Torah. Pei corresponds to to Pshat, to the word Pshat. Pshat means simple. It's the literal aspect of the Torah. And this literal aspect of the Torah actually corresponds to the lowest of all the worlds, so the world of Asiya, which is our world in which we live. It's like the simple meaning of the Torah. We read the text, what actually happens. This is actually the level of Rashi's commentary, as we've discussed in previous episodes, that he's just describing the literal, simple meaning of the Torah. So this would be like, we've been discussing the beginning of the Torah, the story of Breishis. So the pshat level of that story would be just the creation of the world. God created the heavens and the earth and all of that. The remez level would be, which remez means hint. So the remez level would be more of like the allegorical level of the Torah, like that there's something being hinted at in that basic storyline. So, for example, the Vilna Gaon says that initial story of creation, what it's really hinting at is at the 613 commandments, and that if you actually study this story of Breishis, the story of the creation of the world, you can actually find the 613 commandments hidden within it. And this level of remez corresponds to the second to lowest realms, which is the realm of Yetzirah, which comes right above the realm of Asiya. Then we have the world of Bria. The world of Bria, this would correspond to, in the study of Torah, to the type of Torah learning, which is known as drush, which is the aspect of homiletics. This is like the midrashic teachings. So these would be like, a lot of teachings that are really purely oral teachings in nature that are not actually, yes, in a certain sense, we can say that they're hinted at in the text, but it's more than just like a hint, like an allegory in the text that this corresponds to this, but it's actually a whole other teaching that is kind of elaborated upon elsewhere in the oral Torah. That would be the level of drush. And then finally, we have the level of sod, which is the highest of all the levels. The word sod means secret in Hebrew, and that corresponds to the world of Atzilus. And in Torah learning, that would correspond to the realm of Kabbalah. And Chassidus, also touches upon that world. It's the really inner, secret, hidden teachings of the Torah, and it's really the highest of the Torah study. This is the realm of Torah that really does correspond to the will and wisdom of God in an essential way that's really not separate from God at all. And so if we wanted to take this descent, this chain of descent of Torah into the world, making it accessible for us to learn the Torah, we can actually go back to our discussion of the conquering of the land of Israel and the Jews regaining control over the land of Israel. And we can take that whole process and apply it here as well. So once again, going back to how it is that we came to, or that we were coming to, I should say, coming to this full ownership over the land of Israel in a real way. So step 1 was that at the moment of creation, God had in his mind to give the land of Israel to the Jewish people. So it arose in his thought. It was the purpose in God's thought, but it was just in his thought. It wasn't in actuality. And this would correspond to the Torah being in the realm of Atzilus. This would be correspond to the Torah being the will and wisdom of God before it actually descended into the world. And then step 2, as we discussed, was God then giving the land of Israel to the nations of the world in a temporary way. This was part and parcel of the process, ultimately, as we learned, to ultimately give it back to us. But there is a very prolonged period of God giving it to the nations of the world and having it be a secular land in a certain sense. And this corresponds to the descent of Torah into the 3 lower realms, the realms of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. But then, as we've learned, there's a final stage, and that final stage is when we do ultimately conquer the land of Israel, so that now we can have that land of Israel manifest its true identity, its true essence, which was actually their potential all along, which is that it is a Jewish land through and through. And as we've learned, this can only come about through the conquest, through a very physical and kind of secular conquest of the land of Israel. So too, when it comes to Torah, the Torah itself, in order for this highest will and wisdom of God, this level of sod, this level of Atzilus, of the Torah, which is its highest form, its source of where it came from, actually really only becomes manifest and comes about through learning the Torah on its most basic, lowest level, which is, once again, the level of pshat, the simple level of the Torah. So thus it happens that when we learn the Torah on this very simple basic level, on this lowest quote unquote level, this actually brings out and manifests the essence of the Torah, the highest level of the Torah, because once again, the end is wedged in the beginning and the beginning is wedged in the end. And it makes this essence of the Torah, this highest level of the Torah, become manifest down here in this world, so that it's not just up there in potential, but it's actually here in a revealed way. And with this, the Rebbe concludes the Sicha. And just as a final note, and we're going to do a little summary in a minute, but as a final note to this, what I think is really amazing about the Sicha is that in this conclusion, what the Rebbe is basically telling us that really the way through which we bring about this highest level of the Torah into the world, which is the ultimate purpose of the Torah and the ultimate purpose of the world, is through learning the simple level of the Torah, which is what the Sicha is all about. Because again, what is this whole Sicha? This whole Sicha is a deep analysis of Rashi, the very first Rashi, on the very beginning of the Torah, on the very beginning of the simple literal Torah. And Rashi is all about that literal simple level of the Torah. Rashi's commentary belongs in the realm of pshat of the Torah. It's not sod, it's not drush, it's not remez. It's really in the realm of pshat. But as we learned within, and this brings us back to the very, very beginning of the Sicha, where we mentioned that the Alter Rebbe taught that within Rashi's teachings are found the deepest secrets of the Torah. This is why he called it the wine of the Torah, Yena Shel Torah, because of this. So once again, to summarize, what we've basically learned in the Sicha is that there are 3 stages to 3 different things. There are 3 stages to the conquering and ultimate ownership of the land of Israel by the Jews. There are 3 stages to our own personal study of the Torah. And there are 3 stages to the descent of the Torah itself into our world. And each one of these 3 stages parallel each other. So the 3 stages of the ownership of the land of Israel is that stage 1, God gave it to whom he deemed proper in his eyes in thought, i.e. to the Jewish people that he set aside in his mind in thought. Stage 2, he then gave it to them, to the nations of the world. And stage 3, he ultimately took it from them and gave it to us. We conquered the land of Israel. We're still conquering the land of Israel, and it ultimately becomes us in an eternal and real and essential way. Then the way that we learn Torah, the 3 stages are: first, we're taught the whole thing from above in our mother's womb. And this, again, corresponds to when God gave it to whom he deemed proper in his eyes in thought. Stage 2 is then when we are born, we forget the entire Torah that we learned and we utilize our own efforts to learn Torah, so that we're now learning Torah in a very human and limited way. And this would correspond to the stage through which God gave the land of Israel to the non-Jewish nations, and they had it in their possession for many years. And then stage 3 is that when the light of Torah actually shines within us through our Torah study in a way that resembles the Torah that we learned from above in our mother's womb. And this, again, corresponds to the conquering of the land of Israel by the Jewish people, ultimately, when we truly conquer it and it becomes a fully integrated Jewish land. And then finally, we have the way, the stages through which the Torah itself descends into this world, where originally we know that stage 1 is that the Torah is in its source, has no connection to the world. It's the will and wisdom of God in this pristine, pure way that's inaccessible, but it's there. This again would correspond to God setting aside in his mind the land of Israel for the Jews. It would also correspond to us learning Torah in our mother's womb in a way that's very very real, but very detached from the physical world. Then we know that stage 2 is when the Torah descends and travels through the 3 lower realms of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, which manifests as the different aspects of the Torah: Drash, Remez, and Pshat, the homiletics, the allegorical, and the simple levels of Torah. And this would correspond to the land of Israel being in the hands of the non-Jewish nations for many years. It would also correspond to the many years of us personally, every single person toiling and struggling with their own limited intellectual capacities to understand the Torah. And then finally, we have the stage of ultimately accessing the essential will and wisdom of God that's found in the Torah, that is really what the Torah is, specifically and perhaps paradoxically through our study of the Pshat of Torah, through the lowest level of Asiyah in the Torah, which again would correspond to the Jews ultimately conquering the land through their own efforts, through their own physical efforts, but yet it becomes way more than just a regular type of conquering of the land. It becomes a really divine and spiritual capture of the land that transforms the land of Israel into an eternal and thorough Jewish land. And in terms of our Torah study, this would correspond to us reaccessing this initial prenatal type of Torah that we had, like that surpasses way beyond the type of Torah learning that we can get through our own intellectual endeavors alone. So that's it. And as a final note, the Rebbe concludes his Sicha here with two final thoughts. The first thought is to really show us how this whole, study that we've done, this whole journey that we've been on, this is part 9 of this long lecture series in really delving into this first Rashi. The Rebbe tells us how this very first commentary actually, in an interesting way, actually serves as Rashi's introduction to what his Torah commentary is really all about. So we mentioned much earlier along in this series that many other commentators, before just, jumping in and giving the commentary, right before their very first commentary, they often give a little bit of an introduction as to who they are, how they're going to go about analyzing what their commentary is based on and all of that. When it comes to Rashi, he doesn't seem to do that. Like with Rashi, he just jumps right in and here is his first commentary on the Torah. But what the Rebbe tells us here is that in fact, what if we actually looked at this very initial commentary of Rashi as his introduction? That through learning this very first Rashi, as we've done in these past few weeks, is that we came to hopefully appreciate the value and importance of studying the simple meaning of the text, the literal meaning of the Torah, which is Rashi's whole style. And that in fact, through studying the simple level of the text, it's specifically that level that's going to give us access to the wine of the Torah, to the secrets of the Torah, to the secrets of the Torah, which is the ultimate purpose, which is going to lead us to the ultimate revelation of Mashiach, which Mashiach is this revelation of the essence of the Torah. And because, as we mentioned, the Torah is a macrocosm of the entire world, or a microcosm of the entire world, depending on how you look at it. So this whole discussion of the land of Israel, which is going to be in the times of Mashiach, we're going to really see this in a manifest way, how the land of Israel is the Jewish land in an undisputed way. The entire world is going to see this and accept this and rejoice in it. And in fact, it's taught that we're going to not only conquer the entire land of Israel, which is going to include the lands of the Kini, Knizi, and Kadmoni, which we haven't conquered so far. It's actually going to spread out. The land of Israel is actually going to spread out to the entire world. So through coming to this deeper appreciation of Torah and how to learn Torah properly and studying Torah in this way of, going from the literal meaning, the simple meaning, and accessing thereby the deepest essence of the Torah, this is what's going to lead to and spill over, hopefully, to this collective and global manifestation of all of this, which is going to be this conquering of the land of Israel in a true sense, and ultimately the Mashiach in a collective and global way. May it happen very, very soon. So that's it. So we did it. And I hope you enjoyed this lecture series. As I mentioned, it was not easy to put together. There were, really just a lot of details to it all. But, that was kind of the whole point. And that was, hopefully if you've followed along in this journey as well, you really came to this appreciation of the process of Torah study, that it's meant to be difficult. It's meant to be, you're meant to toil in it. It's meant to be a process-oriented type of thing. And that through going through this process, this is ultimately how we reveal the gems, the inner gems that are found in the Torah. As I mentioned, there's a written aspect to this lecture series as well, for those of you that want a review of it or find that you have an easier time following along through reading it or whatever. So you should be able to find the link to that in the show notes corresponding to this episode. And till next time, and a happy Hanukkah to those of you that are listening to this on Hanukkah. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.